They didn't look dangerous. They didn't act suspicious. And most people trusted them without hesitation. That's what makes these crimes so disturbing. Not the violence alone, but the betrayal. Because in every case you're about to hear, the warning signs weren't ignored. They were never noticed. Doctors, nurses, neighbors, family men, community leaders, people you would never cross the street to avoid. Today, we're counting down the top 10 most evil crimes committed by people everyone trusted, and why appearances can be the most dangerous disguise of all. Stay with us until the end, because number 1 fooled absolutely everyone. Number 10, the visionary who lied to the world. Elizabeth Holmes. She didn't carry a weapon. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten anyone. She wore a black turtleneck to the world. Elizabeth Holmes looked like the future. Young, articulate, confident. She spoke about healthcare the way visionaries speak about changing history. She promised a revolution, a single drop of blood that could detect hundreds of diseases, faster diagnoses, cheaper tests, lives saved, and people believed her. Not just ordinary people, but some of the most powerful institutions on Earth. Investors poured in billions. Doctors welcomed her technology. Governments partnered with her company. Military officials imagined using it on the battlefield. She was compared to Steve Jobs. She stood on stages next to presidents and generals. Her company, Theranos, was valued at $9 billion. All of it was built on trust. But behind the closed doors of Theranos Laboratories, the miracle machine didn't work. It never had. Blood samples failed. Results were wildly inaccurate. Machines malfunctioned constantly. Technicians quietly ran tests on traditional devices while pretending the proprietary technology was responsible for results. Employees raised concerns and were silenced. Scientists questioned the data and were dismissed. Whistleblowers were threatened with lawsuits. The illusion had to be protected, because if the truth came out, everything would collapse. And so the deception continued. Patients were told they were healthy when they were sick. Others were told they might be dying when nothing was wrong. Some sought unnecessary treatments. Others delayed critical care because they believed the results they were given. Real people paid the price for a lie dressed up as innovation. This wasn't a technical failure. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a startup struggling to find its footing. It was sustained deception, maintained through charisma, intimidation, and the assumption that someone so confident, so celebrated, must be telling the truth. Elizabeth Holmes didn't need violence to cause harm. She didn't need force. She needed belief. And that's what makes this case so disturbing, because it exposes a dangerous reality. Trust itself can be weaponized. When people believe in a person strongly enough, they stop asking questions. They ignore red flags. They explain away inconsistencies. They assume that doubt is cynicism and that optimism is virtue. And when that happens, accountability disappears. By the time the truth finally emerged, the damage was already done. Careers were ruined. Patients were misled. Confidence in medical innovation was shaken. The story didn't end with a dramatic arrest or a crime scene, but with a slow, humiliating unraveling of an empire built on lies. And it leaves us with a chilling question. If one person can fool world leaders, scientists, regulators, and doctors all at the same time, who else might be fooling us right now? Number 9, the quiet baker next door, Robert Hansen. Robert Hansen was the kind of man people barely noticed. He was shy, socially awkward, often uncomfortable in conversations. He didn't have the confidence that made people wary, nor the charm that drew attention. In a town full of louder personalities, he blended into the background with ease. Hansen owned a small bakery in Alaska. He showed up early. He worked hard. He paid his bills on time. To customers, he was polite but distant. To neighbors, he was simply the quiet man who kept to himself. No one saw him as a threat. In fact, many people describe him using the same words over and over again, odd but harmless. That assumption would cost lives. Behind the routine of dough and ovens, behind the quiet greetings and lowered eyes, Robert Hansen was living a second life, one built on control, fear, and violence. While the community saw a lonely baker struggling to fit in, investigators would later uncover a predator who stalked women, abducted them, and treated human beings like prey. What made Hansen so dangerous wasn't aggression. It was invisibility. He didn't intimidate. He didn't draw attention. He didn't look capable of harm. He blended in. Hansen understood something that many criminals never do. Suspicion follows confidence, not awkwardness. People instinctively watch the loud, the angry, the strange and obvious ways. But Hansen's strangeness was quiet, non-threatening, easy to dismiss. Women who encountered him didn't see danger. They saw an uncomfortable man, someone easy to ignore or underestimate. That misjudgment gave him access and time. For years, women in Alaska began to disappear. At first, the cases seemed unrelated, different locations, different circumstances. Some were reported missing, others weren't. Many lived on the margins of society, making their disappearances easier to overlook. And Robert Hansen remained exactly where he'd always been, working, baking, blending in. Neighbors later told investigators they never heard arguments, screams, or disturbances. Hansen was known for his routine, predictable, reliable, safe. That word, safe, would haunt the investigation. When law enforcement finally connected the dots, the truth shocked the entire community. The quiet baker was not only responsible for multiple murders, but had carefully planned them. He used the wilderness of Alaska as a weapon, exploiting the vast, unforgiving landscape to ensure his victims had little chance of survival. The brutality of his crime stood in horrifying contrast to his public image. People struggled to reconcile the man. They thought they knew what the monster investigators described. Some refused to believe it at first. Others asked the same question over and over again. How could we not see this? But the warning signs were never loud. They never announced themselves. Hansen didn't look like what people expected a killer to look like. And that was the point. The scariest part of Robert Hansen's story isn't just what he did. It's how long he did it while hiding in plain sight. How easily society dismissed him as insignificant. How quickly harmless became invisible. Because the truth is this: some of the most dangerous people aren't the ones who stand out. They're the ones no one thinks to watch. Number 8. The nurse parents thanked. Beverly Alit. She worked in a children's hospital. A place built on hope, fear, and quiet prayers whispered in hallways at night. A place where parents surrendered their sick children to strangers in uniforms, believing that everyone inside those walls was there to protect life. And Beverly Alit wore that uniform. She was a pediatric nurse, young, soft-spoken, and seemingly dedicated. Parents thanked her. Some trusted her so completely they stepped out of rooms to rest, believing their child was safest when she was near. After all, nurses were the helpers, the caregivers, the ones who stayed when doctors left. What no one understood at the time was that Beverly Alit didn't need to force her way in. She already had access. Children began to collapse unexpectedly. Some stopped breathing. Others suffered sudden medical emergencies that made no sense given their conditions. Doctors worked frantically to save them. Parents stood frozen, watching machines and monitors, terrified but trusting. Each incident was treated as a tragic complication. Children are fragile. After all, hospitals see death. No one wanted to believe there was a pattern, and that's what protected her. Beverly Alit didn't run. She didn't panic. She didn't raise suspicion. She stayed calm, helpful, present. In some cases, she was the one who alerted doctors that something was wrong. In others, she comforted grieving parents moments after their child collapsed, offering sympathy that felt genuine. The same nurse who held their hands was the same nurse who caused the harm. It took far too long for anyone to ask the question no one wants to ask in a children's hospital. What if the danger isn't outside the room, but inside it? By the time investigators realized the truth, multiple children had been killed or permanently harmed. The betrayal was unbearable, not just because of what she did, but because of where she did it. Hospitals are built on trust. Pediatric wards even more so. Parents believe that once their child is handed over, the worst danger has passed. Beverly Elite exploited that belief completely. And when the truth finally emerged, it shattered not only families, but faith in a system meant to protect the most vulnerable. Because if a nurse can do this, who else might we trust without question? Number 7, the doctor who never healed. Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was a family doctor. To his patients, he wasn't just a physician, he was reassurance. He made house calls. He spoke calmly. He looked people in the eye and projected confidence in every word he said. Elderly patients trusted him completely, often more than they trusted their own families. When Shipman entered a room, fear left. That was his power. Families welcomed him into their homes without hesitation. They left him alone with their parents, their grandparents, their loved ones. If Shipman said someone was ill, they believed him. If he said a death was natural, they accepted it. There was no reason not to. He was a doctor. Over time, Shipman became a constant presence at the end of life. He certified deaths. He signed paperwork. He reassured grieving relatives that everything had been peaceful, that nothing more could have been done. And because he was calm, because he was professional, because he was trusted absolutely, no one questioned the pattern. Patients died shortly after seeing him. Deaths often occurred at home. Medical records were minimal. Autopsies were rarely requested. It all looked normal. For years, Shipman operated in plain sight, killing again and again without suspicion. Not because he hid his actions well, but because authority hid them for him. His word carried weight. His signature closed cases. His presence ended doubt. Those who noticed small inconsistencies were dismissed. Nurses hesitated to speak. Families assumed coincidence. After all, who would accuse a doctor of murder? That question became his shield. By the time investigators finally took a closer look, the scale of the crimes was almost impossible to comprehend. Harold Shipman had become one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history. Not by force, not by fear, but by trust. What protected him wasn't secrecy. It was the assumption that doctors heal, not harm. And when someone is trusted without limits, no one asks questions until it's far too late. Number 6, the coach who built a perfect image. Jerry Sandusky. Jerry Sandusky didn't just build a career. He built an image to the outside world. He was everything people wanted to believe in. A respected football coach, a mentor, a man who dedicated his life to helping vulnerable children find structure, discipline, and hope. Parents trusted him without hesitation. Institutions praised him. Communities celebrated him. That image didn't just make him admired, it made him untouchable. Sandusky positioned himself as a protector of children, founding a charity designed to help at-risk youth, a move that further strengthened public trust. The organization became his shield. If he was helping children, how could he possibly be harming them? That question was never asked loudly enough. Behind closed doors, the reality was horrifying. Children who came to Sandusky seeking guidance were instead manipulated, groomed, and abused. Many of them were already vulnerable, emotionally, socially, or economically, making them easier to silence and easier to dismiss. And when warning signs did appear, they were absorbed by the system. Concerns were minimized. Whispers were ignored. Reports were softened into misunderstandings. People who suspected something was wrong struggled with an impossible conflict. The evidence in front of them versus the reputation they believed in. Institutions chose a reputation. Administrators worried about scandal. Colleagues feared professional consequences. Powerful organizations protected their image instead of the children in their care. Each layer of authority added distance between the victims and justice. And so the abuse continued, not for months, but for years. What makes this case especially disturbing isn't just the crimes themselves. It's how many opportunities existed to stop them, and how consistently those opportunities were wasted. Victims later described the same feeling again and again, being unheard, disbelieved, or quietly dismissed. Some were told they had misunderstood. Others were encouraged to stay silent for the greater good. Many carried the trauma alone, convinced no one would ever take their word over his. That is the true horror of this case. It wasn't just one man committing crimes in secret. It was a system that chose comfort over confrontation, reputation over responsibility, and trust over truth. When the full scope of Sandusky's actions finally came to light, the fallout was immense. Careers ended, institutions collapsed, public trust shattered. But for the victims, justice came far too late. This case stands as a chilling reminder that evil doesn't always hide in shadows. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, wrapped in praise, authority, and good intentions. And when trust becomes unquestionable, it doesn't just protect the wrong people, it silences the right ones. And the most unsettling question remains: how many people knew and chose to look away? Number 5, the clown everyone invited inside, John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy didn't look like a monster. He looked like the kind of man parents trusted without hesitation. He entertained children at birthday parties, dressed as a cheerful clown. He volunteered in his community. He attended neighborhood gatherings and spoke comfortably with police officers, local politicians, and business owners. He lived in a quiet suburban home where nothing ever seemed out of place. People waved at him. People smiled back. People invited him inside. And that was the most dangerous thing about him. Gacy carefully built a reputation that made suspicion feel impossible. He understood something many predators understand instinctively, that trust is not earned through kindness alone, but through visibility. The more people saw him helping, laughing, and participating, the less they questioned anything else. He wasn't hiding. He was performing. To the outside world, Gacy was a man who loved children, loved community, and loved attention. He played the role of Pogo the Clown at charity events, hospitals, and parties. A smiling, colorful figure meant to represent joy and safety. But behind that painted smile was a private world no one wanted to imagine. Beneath Gacy's home, in the crawl space below his floorboards, lay the truth. One victim after another, buried in silence. Dozens of young men and boys disappeared over the years. Many of them last seen entering his house willingly. They trusted him. Some were offered jobs. Others were offered help, money, or kindness. None of them believed they were walking into danger. What made Gacy especially terrifying was not just the scale of his crimes, but how ordinary he seemed while committing them. He worked. He socialized. He joked with neighbors. He lived a double life so convincingly that even when suspicions briefly surfaced, they were brushed aside. After all, he was that guy. The clown. The volunteer. The friendly neighbor. When investigators finally searched his home, the discovery shattered the illusion completely. The house that had once hosted parties and gatherings became a crime scene beyond comprehension. The crawl space beneath the floors, a space meant to support the structure above, had instead been used to hide unimaginable horror. And suddenly, everyone had the same question: how could this happen without anyone noticing? The answer is uncomfortable, because monsters don't always lurk in shadows. They don't always break in through windows. They don't always look dangerous. Sometimes, the biggest monsters were smiles. They wear costumes. They earn trust. And sometimes, they don't hide in the dark. They knock, and we let them in. Number 4, the church leader with a double life, Dennis Rader. To the people who knew him, Dennis Rader was the definition of stability. He was a husband, a father, a man who attended church every week, and eventually became its president. He enforced city codes, wrote compliance reports, and spoke confidently about rules and order. Neighbors trusted him. Church members respected him. Co-workers saw him as strict but fair. And for decades, no one suspected that behind this rigid, orderly life, Dennis Rader was living as BTK, a serial killer whose name stood for bind, torture, kill. What makes this case truly horrifying isn't just the number of victims. It's the precision. Rader didn't lose control. He didn't spiral publicly. He didn't let his crimes disrupt his routine. He planned murders the same way he planned meetings, methodically, patiently, and without emotion. After committing acts of extreme violence, he would return home, eat dinner with his family, attend church functions, and resume his role as a moral authority in his community. There were no dramatic mood swings, no visible guilt, no cracks in the mask. For years, law enforcement searched for a monster. Instead, the monster sat in pews, led prayers, and lectured others about discipline. Rader wrote letters to police and the media, taunting them, demanding recognition. Yet even then, no one looked closely at the man living quietly among them. His normalcy became his camouflage. Trust didn't raise suspicion. It erased it. The same qualities that made people feel safe around him, his routine, his authority, his calm demeanor, were the very things that allowed him to remain hidden for decades. When he was finally caught, the shock wasn't just that BTK had been found. It was who he was. People didn't ask, how did he get away with it? They asked, how do we not see it? The answer was simple and disturbing, because Dennis Rader didn't look like a killer. He looked like someone you would trust to lead a church. And that trust didn't stop him. It protected him. Number 3, the nurse no one questioned, Lucy Letby. Babies began to die while Lucy Letby was on shift. At first, the deaths were treated as tragic coincidences, the kind that sadly occur in neonatal units where the most fragile lives fight to survive. Premature infants, complicated births, medical uncertainty. No one wanted to believe anything else, and no one wanted to look too closely. Lucy Letby was a nurse, calm, soft-spoken, dedicated. She sent sympathy cards to grieving parents. She stayed late. She volunteered for extra shifts. To colleagues, she appeared caring, even devastated when a baby didn't make it. That image mattered, because in hospitals, trust is a foundation everything rests on. Doctors trust nurses. Parents trust medical staff. And when that trust exists, doubt feels almost cruel. As the deaths continued, patterns quietly formed, but they were dismissed. Concerns were raised and softened. Senior staff hesitated. Administrators reassured themselves. The idea that a nurse could be deliberately harming infants was simply too disturbing to accept. So instead, explanations were found elsewhere. Equipment failures, natural causes, bad luck, all while Lucy Letby remained present, always nearby, always calm. It wasn't until much later that investigators realized the most chilling truth. The evidence had been there all along. The timelines, the correlations, the repeated presence of the same nurse during unexplained collapses. But trust delayed belief, and belief delayed action. By the time suspicion finally overcame denial, the damage was irreversible. Lives had already been lost, families shattered. A system designed to protect the vulnerable had protected the wrong person instead. The Lucy Letby case is not just a story about one individual. It is a warning, a reminder that authority and compassion, when left unquestioned, can become shields behind which unimaginable harm hides. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one who looks threatening. It's the one no one thinks to question. Number 2, the helpful law student, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy didn't look like a monster. He was polite, intelligent, well-spoken. He dressed neatly, studied law, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone going somewhere in life. Professors saw potential in him. Friends described him as charming. Strangers found him easy to trust. And that was a danger. Bundy understood something most predators don't. People want to help those who seem harmless. He used a fake injury, a cast, a crutch, small details designed to disarm suspicion. He asked for simple favors. Carry a book, help load a car, walk just a little closer. And people did. Not because they were careless, but because he looked like someone they should trust. Once that trust was given, it became his most powerful weapon. Bundy didn't rely on brute force at first. He relied on social expectations, on politeness, empathy, and the fear of seeming rude. Victims later recalled moments of hesitation, fleeting instincts that something felt wrong. But those instincts were overridden by a lifetime of being taught that helpfulness equals safety. For years, Bundy moved freely through campuses and communities, blending in perfectly. Even when suspicions arose, they struggled to stick. He was articulate, cooperative, calm under questioning. He didn't fit the image people had of a killer. That image protected him. What makes the case so unsettling isn't just the number of lives lost. It's how easily he passed as normal. How many times he was trusted, by strangers, by friends, even by authorities, before the truth could no longer be ignored. Decades later, his name still provokes the same chilling question. Not how could he do it, but something far more uncomfortable. Would I have trusted him too? Number 1, the family man who fooled everyone. Chris Watts. Quiet, cooperative, calm. Chris Watts didn't stand out in a room, and that was exactly the problem. He was the kind of man people described using safe words: polite, reserved, easygoing, a devoted father, a supportive husband, a man who avoided conflict and followed the rules. When neighbors saw him playing with his children in the driveway, nothing fell off. When co-workers spoke about him, they called him reliable. Even after his family disappeared, he spoke to police with a steady voice and a controlled expression, never raising suspicion, never appearing panicked. He looked like the safest man in the room, and that image became his greatest shield. Behind closed doors, however, a very different reality was unfolding. Beneath the calm exterior was a man who had learned how to suppress emotion, avoid confrontation, and present whatever version of himself people expected to see. Friends would later say he never complained, never argued, never showed anger, but silence doesn't mean peace. As pressure built inside his carefully controlled life, financial stress, marital tension, and a desire to escape responsibility, Chris Watts didn't lash out in obvious ways. There were no public breakdowns, no visible warning signs. Instead, he internalized everything, letting resentment grow quietly, unnoticed by everyone around him. When the unthinkable finally happened, it wasn't rage that shocked investigators. It was how ordinary he seemed afterward. He gave interviews to the media asking for his family's safe return. He spoke softly about his missing wife and children, standing in front of his home as if he were a worried husband waiting for answers. His body language was relaxed, his tone measured. Nothing about him looked dangerous. And that's what makes this case so disturbing. Because the horror wasn't hidden behind a mask of chaos or instability. It was hidden behind routine, behind politeness, behind the illusion of man who had done everything right. What makes this case number 1 isn't just the brutality of the crime. It's the chilling realization that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it blends in, sometimes it smiles, and sometimes it looks exactly like someone you trust without a second thought. These cases remind us of something uncomfortable. Evil doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it looks helpful. Sometimes it looks familiar. Sometimes it looks like someone you trust. So the next time someone says, "I never would have suspected them," remember, no one ever does. Which case disturbed you the most, and why? And do you think trust makes us blind to danger? If stories like these make you question everything you thought you knew, subscribe to Unimaginable True Crimes, because here, trust is never assumed.